You spent 3 months on this. In my house, it's beautiful. That's the problem.
Amara did not scream. She watched the firelight cross her ruined work and made a decision no one could see. What do you do when the person who stole your whole life is the one everyone claps for? When the world calls her a genius, and the genius is yours, taken stitch by stitch, and set on fire in front of your eyes. What is left of a person after that? Amara Eze came to this country with 2 hands, 1 suitcase, and a way of sewing her grandmother taught her by a river, a whole ocean away. Before long, that way of sewing had a famous name, a famous face, and a famous house behind it. None of them were hers. They put her in the back room. They called her the cleaner. They let her believe she was nothing. But Amara had kept something with dates on it, something in her own hand. And on the night you just saw, she stopped being quiet. If stories of betrayal and justice move you, take 1 second to subscribe. It helps more than you know. Now, let's begin. To understand what Amara lost, you have to cross an ocean and go back many years to a small house beside a slow brown river. That is where her grandmother taught her to sew. Her grandmother's hands were old and hard, but when they moved over cloth, something happened that Amara has never been able to explain. The old woman would pull the needle through fabric in a way no one else did. A long, sliding, doubling stitch that caught the light and moved with it, so that a still piece of cloth looked like water running, like sunlight on a river. She called it the river stitch. "Everything in life flows, my daughter," she would say, "so the cloth must flow too." Amara learned it the way you learn a prayer. By the time she was 12, her river work was finer than her grandmother's. By the time she was 20, women in 3 villages wanted their wedding cloth done by her hands because Amara's cloth seemed alive. And Amara wrote everything down. Every pattern, every count, every new idea that came to her in the night. She kept a stack of thick journals, and on the first page of each one, she wrote the date, because her grandmother had told her, "A thing you make is yours only if you can show when it was born." She did not know back then how much those dates would one day matter. 20 years later, and an ocean away, those same journals sat locked in a drawer in a cramped apartment in New York, under a woman the fashion world did not even know was alive. Because this is how the story goes when you are poor and gifted and far from home. Amara came to America with that 1 suitcase and that way of sewing. She took any work she could find, hemming, alterations, beadwork in the back of other people's shops, her fingers cold in rooms that were never quite warm. And in one of those back rooms, a young, hungry, ambitious designer walked in one afternoon, looking for someone cheap and fast to finish a gown for an important client. Her name was Vivian Sinclair. Back then, Vivian was nobody. She had a rich family, a sharp tongue, beautiful sketches, and one problem. Her sketches were ordinary, pretty, but ordinary. Nothing about them made a person stop breathing. Then she saw Amara's hands move. Amara took Vivian's plain gown and along the bodice laid down her grandmother's river stitch, that sliding, living light. When she was finished, the dress did not look sewn. It looked like it was pouring. Vivian stood in that little back room and stared at it for a long, long time. And something in her face changed. Amara saw it and did not understand it yet. She thought it was joy. It was hunger. "Who taught you this?" Vivian asked quietly. "My grandmother," Amara said, proud. "It is called the river stitch." "Does anyone else here do it?" "No," Amara said. "Only me." Vivian smiled. "Come work for me," she said. "Only me. I'll take care of you." And Amara, far from home and tired of cold back rooms, believed her. She signed a small commission contract that afternoon, dated, with her name written on it as the maker. She kept her copy, the way she kept everything. That contract and those dated journals are the reason you are hearing this story at all. The gown Amara built for Vivian's first show did not just sell. It changed everything. The night it walked the runway, the room went silent, then loud. People stood up. A famous critic wrote that he had seen a new language in cloth, that Vivian Sinclair had made fabric look like moving water, like light itself, something no one had done before. He gave it a name that stuck to it forever. He called it the Cascade. Not the river, the Cascade. And when the cameras turned to Vivian and asked her where this came from what deep place in her soul, Amara was standing 40 feet away in the dark, holding pins in her mouth. Vivian put her hand on her heart and said, "It just came to me. I've been dreaming it my whole life." Amara waited to hear her own name. It did not come. Not that night. Not the next year. Not ever. The house of Sinclair rose like a fire. The Cascade became a movement. Every season, Vivian's gowns poured and shimmered and moved, and the world could not get enough. She was on magazine covers. Students studied the Sinclair technique. Museums called. Money came in like the tide. And here is the cruel joke at the center of all of it. Vivian still could not do the stitch. She could sketch it. She could point at it. But her own hands could not make the river run. Only 2 hands in the whole world could do it the way it needed to be done at that level. Amara's. So Vivian kept her. She had to. But she could not have her seen. Slowly, quietly, year by year, Amara was moved. First out of the main workroom, where the young designers worked in good light, then to a smaller room, then to the back, a windowless room by the storage with a single lamp where she did the real river work alone. The work the whole house depended on. The work no magazine ever photographed. New staff came and went. To them, Amara was just the quiet older woman in the back who did finishing. Some of them called her the cleaner because she was always there early and left late and never spoke up. Vivian never corrected them. She liked it that way. They handed Amara the gowns after the young designers had created them. And Amara would lay in the Cascade, her grandmother's river, and hand them back, and the young designer would take the bow. One late night, a bright new girl named Bisi sat beside Amara and watched her hands and whispered, "Ma, this is the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. Where did you learn it?" Amara only smiled. "A long way from here," she said. "Does Miss Sinclair know you can do this?" Amara looked at her for a moment. "She knows," she said quietly. And she said nothing more. Because Amara had learned the shape of her cage. She was far from home. She sent almost every dollar back to family who needed it. Her papers were fragile, and a woman like her did not fight a woman like Vivian and win. Who would believe the cleaner over the genius? So she swallowed it. Every year, she kept her head down, and she kept her journals. And at night, she told herself the same thing. I know what is true. That has to be enough. But it was getting harder, because Vivian did not just take the technique. She grew cruel with the safety of it. She would bring important guests to the back room to show them where the magic doesn't happen, and laugh. And the guests would laugh, and Amara would keep her eyes on her needle. When Amara quietly showed her a new idea, a way to make the river split and braid into 2 rivers, Vivian took the sketch out of her hand, studied it, and 3 months later unveiled it on a runway as my boldest work yet. She did not even look at Amara when she said it. And the pay stayed small, and the years stacked up. And the woman whose grandmother's hands had once made whole villages weep now ate her lunch alone in a windowless room, listening to the applause down the hall for a river she had carried across an ocean. Then this year, something in Amara woke up. The House of Sinclair was preparing its biggest event in a decade. A huge show and a museum exhibit to follow, the paper said. 20 years of the Cascade. 20 years honoring Vivian as the artist who had started it all. 20 years. Amara did the math alone in her back room, and her hands went still. 20 years of a grandmother's river wearing another woman's name. And she thought, let me make one true thing. For 3 months, on her own time, with her own thread, Amara built a gown. Not for the house, for herself, and for the old woman by the river. She poured everything into it, every secret her grandmother ever taught her, every idea she had never been allowed to sign. On that gown, the river did not just run. It lived. It moved when the wearer breathed. BC saw it once and started to cry and did not know why. Amara did not fully know what she meant to do with it. Maybe show it to Vivian and finally say the words out loud. Maybe just to prove to herself that she was still real. She never got the chance to decide. Because 3 days before the show, Vivian Sinclair walked into the back room without knocking and saw it. She stopped. She stared. And on her face came that same look Amara had seen 20 years before in a little shop when everything began. The hunger. And now, underneath it, something colder. Because this gown was better than anything hanging in Vivian's showroom. And it asked the one question Vivian could not afford anyone in the world to ask. Who really makes the river run? Vivian walked slowly around it. She touched the hem. She smiled that small, cold smile. You spent 3 months on this? She said softly. In my house? And she reached into her pocket. If you have ever watched someone try to burn the truth to keep a lie alive, stay with me, because what Amara did next is the reason her name is the one you will remember. Take 1 second to subscribe, and let's finish this. The fire was gone in less than a minute. The smell of it stayed for days. Amara knelt on the floor of her back room and gathered the black, curled pieces of 3 months of her life into her 2 hands, and Vivian watched her do it. And then, Vivian said the thing that broke the last thread. Clean this up, she said, and finish the show gowns by Thursday. She turned in the doorway, and Amara, don't ever waste my thread on your little projects again. Then she was gone, and her heels clicked away down the hall, back toward the light. Amara stayed on the floor a long time. She was not crying. She was very, very still. The stillness of water, right before it breaks over a fall. Because something had finally become simple to her. For 20 years, she had told herself the same soft lie. I know what is true, and that has to be enough. Kneeling there, holding the ashes of the one honest thing she had made, she understood that it was not enough. It had never been enough. A truth that no one is allowed to see is not mercy. It is just another cage. Her grandmother had not taught her the river so that it could drown in silence in a windowless room. So Amara stood up. She washed the soot from her hands, and she went home and unlocked the drawer. There they were, the journals. 20, 30 of them, thick and worn, going back and back and back. The newest ones from New York, the middle ones from home, and at the very bottom, the oldest of all, a small, water-stained book she had carried across the ocean, its first page dated in her own young hand, decades before the House of Sinclair existed at all. On page after page, drawn and counted and named in her writing, was the river stitch, every version of it, every idea Vivian had ever unveiled for the first time. Here, years earlier, in Amara's hand, with a date beside it. And under them, in an envelope soft with age, the first thing she had ever signed for Vivian, a small commission contract from a cold back room 20 years ago, with Amara Eze written on the line that said Maker, and the date written beside her name. A thing you make is yours only if you can show when it was born. Amara sat with all of it spread around her on the floor, and for the first time in 20 years, she was not afraid. She knew she could not fight Vivian in Vivian's world, so she would not. She would take the truth to the one place even Vivian could not control: the museum. The great exhibit, 20 Years of the Cascade, was being built by a serious woman named Dr. Halloran, a historian who had spent her life tracing where beautiful things really come from. Amara had heard the young designers complain about her. She was difficult, they said. She kept asking where things really came from, for the earliest sketches, for proof of where the famous technique was truly born. And Vivian kept putting her off with charm and vague dreams. Amara wrote Dr. Halloran a short letter. She did not accuse anyone. She only said, I believe I can show you where the cascade was born. I have it in writing, with dates. May I bring it to you? 3 days later, she sat across a wide table from Dr. Halloran, and she opened the oldest journal, and she watched a serious woman's face slowly change. This paper, Dr. Halloran said quietly, turning a page with careful fingers. This ink, this date. She looked up. Ms. Eze, do you understand what you are holding? Yes, Amara said. I made it. Dr. Halloran did not rush. Serious people never do. She had the paper tested and the ink tested. She laid Amara's dated journals beside the House of Sinclair's earliest original sketches and compared them stitch for stitch, count for count. She found the signed contract, 20 years old, naming Amara as the maker. She found the split and braided 2 rivers that Vivian had called my boldest work, drawn and dated in Amara's book 3 months before Vivian ever showed it. She found all of it. And being who she was, she made one decision that changed everything. The truth would not be settled quietly in an office. It would open the exhibit, on the same stage, in front of the same world. So the night came. The great museum hall was full. Critics, cameras, students, buyers, the whole glittering church of fashion, all gathered to worship 20 years of the cascade and the genius who dreamed it. Vivian stood at the top of the room in silver, glowing, ready. Somewhere near the back, in a plain dark dress, stood a quiet older woman almost no one recognized. The cleaner. Amara had asked to be there. Dr. Halloran had made sure of it. Vivian took the stage to great applause and put her hand on her heart, the way she always did. "They ask me where the cascade came from," she said, warm and practiced. "And I tell them the truth. It just came to me. I have been dreaming this river my whole—" "Then let us honor the dream properly," Dr. Halloran said, stepping to the microphone beside her, "with the record." And the great screen behind them came alive, not with a runway, with a page. A worn, water-stained page dated decades ago, an ocean away, and on it, in a young woman's hand, the river stitch. Then the next page, then the next. The room went very quiet. Beside each old dated page, Dr. Halloran's team placed the House of Sinclair's original, years later, always years later, until the whole wall was Amara's hand on the left and Vivian's copy on the right, over and over, the dates climbing down the screen like water down a fall. "The technique the world calls the cascade," Dr. Halloran said, her voice carrying, "appears here, fully formed, decades before the House of Sinclair existed, in these journals, dated, in one woman's hand." She lifted the soft old envelope. "And here is her first contract with this house, 20 years ago, signed, naming her as the maker of the work." She read the name aloud. Amara Eze. Every head in that hall turned, looking for someone who could not possibly be real, and found a plain older woman standing quietly at the back. Vivian's smile cracked. This woman is a seamstress," she said too fast. "She works for me, a finisher. She does not design." "Then she will not be able to do this," Dr. Halloran said simply, "in front of all of you. Will she?" And that was the trap Vivian walked straight into, because on a stand at the center of the stage stood a gown, a new one. Amara had rebuilt it, the burned one, made again, better, with everything her grandmother ever taught her. And beside it lay a needle and thread. Dr. Halloran turned to Vivian first. "Show them," she said. "Lay in one line of the cascade, your movement, your dream, right here." Vivian looked at the needle. 20 years of the world's cameras looked with her. And her hands, her clever, sketching, lying hands, did not move, because they could not. They never could. The silence stretched until it became its own kind of scream. Then Amara walked up from the back of the room. She did not shout. She did not gloat. She picked up the needle, and she bent to the gown, and in front of that whole silent, breathless hall, she pulled the thread through in that long, sliding, doubling way her grandmother taught her, by a slow brown river a whole life ago, and the cloth came alive. It ran. It poured. It moved like light on water while 500 people forgot to breathe. She straightened up. She looked at Vivian, once. Not with hate, with something worse. With truth. "My grandmother called it the river," Amara said, quiet enough that the microphones had to strain, loud enough that everyone heard. "You called it yours, but a river always knows where it came from." And the room broke like a wave. Some fires, you said, come back for you. Vivian's did. By morning, the pages were everywhere. Amara's dated hand beside Vivian's copies. The frozen video of a genius who could not hold a needle. The name of the woman in the back room she had called the cleaner for 20 years. The critic who once wrote of a new language in cloth wrote again, and this time he wrote a single hard sentence that followed Vivian for the rest of her life. He had praised the wrong hands. The House of Sinclair did not survive it. Buyers vanished. The museum retitled the exhibit before it even opened. Students who had studied the Sinclair technique quietly learned a new name for it. And a woman who had spent 20 years being clapped for someone else's soul discovered exactly what she was without it, which was very little and very loud and very alone. Amara did not go to watch her fall. She had never wanted Vivian destroyed. She had only wanted the truth to be allowed to stand up in a room and be seen. Once it did, she was done. She did not forgive her. She simply turned and walked toward her own life and left Vivian standing in the ashes of a fire she had lit herself. Dr. Halloran rebuilt the exhibit around the real story. They kept one thing in a glass case at the very center. Not the rebuilt gown, though that walked the opening to a standing ovation with Amara's name beneath it at last. In the case, they placed a small, charred, curled piece of the original gown. The burned one. The one Vivian thought she had destroyed. Beside it, a card read, "They tried to burn the proof." The proof was never in the cloth. It was in the hands, and in the dates, and in a grandmother by a river who said, "Write down when it was born." Amara opened her own small house after that. Not a giant house, a true one. On the sign above the door, there was no clever brand name and no invented dream. There was only her grandmother's word for it, in plain letters, brought at last into the open. The river. Bisi came to work for her the first week. Amara taught her the stitch in good light, by a wide window, and told her its real story, and told her to keep a journal, and to date every page. And sometimes, late in the evening, when the shop was quiet, and the thread caught the last of the light, Amara would run one line of the river across a fresh piece of cloth, just for herself. The way her grandmother did, a whole ocean and a whole lifetime ago, and watch the still cloth begin to move. She was not the cleaner. She had never been the cleaner. She was the river, and she had finally reached the sea. Here is what I keep thinking about after everything. They can take your work, they can put their name on it and their face in front of it, and let the whole world clap. They can even set the proof on fire in front of your eyes and smile while it burns. But there is one thing they can never take, and that is the truth of who really did it. That lives in your hands. It lives in the quiet record you keep when no one is watching. It lives in whoever taught you and loved you and told you that a thing is yours only if you can show when it was born. So write it down, date it, keep it. Not out of fear, out of self-respect. Because a river can be stolen and dammed and denied for 20 years. But a river always knows where it came from. And in the end, so will everyone else.